Hi everybody, welcome back to OC today, and I must start by saying it's great to have you all back here in the bird room with me. It's been a very busy and very challenging past couple of months with the birds. We've had an awful lot taking place, and that's all things that I'm going to share with you today in this episode. We've got a lot of news with our native birds and some very exciting things to share with you as well. So the 2025 breeding season, it has been a challenging one, and I must start by saying it's still not over. We've still got a number of birds breeding in the nests. Some of them are on eggs, some of them are rearing chicks still, and it is the start of August. So it is quite a late one. I'm going to explain why that is. I mean, basically, if you're in the UK, you'll know that from about the middle of May to the middle of July, we seem to have an 8-week spell where there was barely any rain. It was 30 to 35 degrees every day. And quite simply, our buildings and our birds are just not used to that sort of thing. We had aircon going, we had the doors open, the windows open to get loads of airflow. And whilst it was still a decent temperature in here and it was comparable to what it was outside, it was still just quite uncomfortable for the birds. And that made it a really challenging season for them for the most part over that 8-week spell. We had birds going to nest and laying clutches of eggs that were then clear had they previously been full. We got birds sitting eggs that the eggs failed to hatch and they were dead in shell, as we call it. We even had chicks hatching that just really struggled to cope with the heat as the parents couldn't keep them hydrated enough through the feeding. So it has been very difficult. That's the reason that you've not been in here an awful lot recently, is that when it did cool down and the birds started to get breeding, I needed to leave them alone, get out of here with the cameras and let them get cracking. And thankfully that has paid off, because we've got quite a few young birds to introduce you to today, which is their first time in camera. So you might be able to see behind me, just sort of bobbing about, is a baby greenfinch. So the greenfinches they had quite a good first round, in all honesty. We had most of them all going to nest building. We did lose one hen, sadly, that was a bit of an older bird. She had a clutch and then we lost her, sadly. But we did bring off quite a few young birds. So down here we have our young birds that are now molting. So they've been weaned. We've got some young uns. They're about 3 months old or so now, and they're looking really good. So actually, in terms of total greenfinch chick numbers, we've got 18 chicks, which is better than we had last year. So I'm awfully pleased with that, and that's off of pretty much all of the pairs. So we had 7 pairs for the season, and we've bred off 6 of them, which is quite pleasing. And I've had to make a couple of changes, so we've changed some pairs up. Just in particular, we had to make a slight change with this pair. Basically, I had my best greenfinch cockbird in with this hen in the penthouse suite, and they had 2 chicks, and that was fine. And then the male bird, and I'm not quite sure if it was the young birds that caused this, but he dropped a load of his flight feathers on his left wing. So he was struggling to probably get about the cage as much in the aviary. So I ended up taking him out and actually putting his brother in place. And you can see that the chick that is bobbing about with its mother is actually my best bird's brother's chick. So it's going quite well, and we've got a couple of young birds off them. I'm quite pleased with that, and actually she is in the middle of laying her 3rd clutch now. So I am going to let her go. She's in great condition. You know, it's basically, they've had a rest in sort of June and then they've got started again. So she's quite happy. I'm more than happy to let her go for another round. She's not even looking like she's going to start molting. And the chicks are doing really well. And the same can be said with the other chicks. We've bred a number of chicks. I think it's 4 or 5 off of my best cockbird. They're all housed in here. We've actually got another hen. So you can see this nest site right here. This is the only hen that I couldn't breed off this season. For some reason, she just did not want to breed for me. She'd lay eggs and she'd not sit them, or we'd take the eggs and they'd be clear. But it just seems that after a bit of basically a much needed break in May and June, she's now gone to nest and she's rearing 2 chicks that are 3 days old and are massive. She's doing a fantastic job, her and the male bird. So I'm really quite pleased with that. So she's doing really well with them. They're looking great. We've got another hen on eggs here. We've got another egg that was on eggs down here that was sadly clear. And then we have another hen over there that is also on eggs that are due to hatch in about 2 days' time. So fingers crossed, it looks like the greenies have actually had quite a good year despite the disruption and the break in between. And just to show you, I always like to show the realities of bird keeping. I don't like to just pretend that it's all lovely and it's like a Disney movie where you've just got babies everywhere and things are all nice. You do get bad things happen, as we've mentioned, but this is just a handful of the clear eggs and the dead in shell eggs that we've had this season. So it was during that hot spell from the sort of the end of May to the middle of July that we was just getting so many birds that were laying eggs that were either clear or dead in shell. And I think that's because the temperature, they'd probably incubated at too higher of a temperature, or even, you know, the humidity was so fluctuated. We didn't have any rain, so I was trying to get the humidity up in here by pouring water on the floor and letting it evaporate. But that's just the reality. Is there's just a number of eggs right there from green finches, Redpoles, there's a Horfinch egg in there, there's bearded tit eggs in there, there's canary eggs in there that just failed to hatch. So yeah, that's bird keeping. The lesser Redpoles are a species that have got quite a reputation to them. They're quite well known for, whilst bringing some joy, they also bring a lot of heartache because they often do things that you just can't explain. And that is one of those situations where when the birds do something that you just can't explain, you have to say, hey, that's birds, and that's just what they do. But the Redpoles have actually done quite well this season. They started quite late, so generally the Redpoles are quite raring to go by the end of April. And actually it wasn't until mid-May that they really showed some keen interest. But once they started going, they didn't really stop. And other than a very small spell whilst it was hot, that we had eggs that were just not failing to hatch, we actually have now done quite well. So we've got 3 chicks up here that are about 18 days old. They're being reared very well. They're actually already looking to feed themselves, and I'll show you what I'm trying to get them to feed on whilst it's still, you know, it's considerably warm. It's about 20 degrees still at the moment, but also whilst they're learning to feed, and I'll show you that later on. But we've got another couple here, so we've got a nest actually just at the far end. They have got 3 chicks that are looking excellent. I mean, I don't know how they haven't fledged yet. They're massive. I rung them, 10 days ago, and they're still in the nest and have yet to venture out. So clearly they're being fed quite well and are more than happy to stay in there. We've got other birds. We've had a hen that's built up a couple of times this season. She's laid the odd egg and then it's not hatched, or she's then failed to rear the chick, so I've had to foster the chick out or do whatever there. And that does happen. But equally, if you remember from the start of the season, we was doing a bit of an experiment this year with the Redpoles. I did a accidental experiment, if you like, with my lesser Redpoles last year. We did a trio because we had a couple of spare birds that weren't breeding for us. So we actually did a quadruple in this bottom flight here. So in here we have a very nice lesser Redpole male with 3 different hens, and that's been a very successful experiment. We've actually produced, I think, 15 chicks out of this aviary. We've had 2 nests of 5, a nest of 2, and now we've got a nest of 3 being reared at the back, and we bred from all 3 hens in there. So it's done really well. And actually what I've been seeing is that natural behaviour in Redpoles, that they will nest as a sort of a loose colony, and actually it's been documented in both captivity and in the wild that they might actually help rear other nests of chicks if they aren't rearing themselves. So this has been taking place here, where we've had a male bird that at one point in time was feeding 3 different nests on the go, and we've actually had other hens that have seen chicks calling that weren't their own and have been going over and feeding them anyway. So it seems to be really successful, and I think that's a method I'm going to adapt for future seasons, where I might try and run them in trios, 1 male to 2 females, or maybe more, and maybe even try sort of a colony aviary with 5 hens, 1 male bird, and then multiple nest sites dotted about. But that's worked really well. So we actually need to ring those chicks that are about 6 days old. They've been a little bit slower to develop, just because I think they're probably getting towards the molt, those parent birds, but they're about ready to be rung now and jump in the next couple of days. So we'll do that now. If you follow OC Aviary on other social media platforms, whether that be Facebook, TikTok or Instagram, hopefully you will have seen that we've had quite a bit of success with our bearded tits this season. Of course, the bearded tits, or the bearded Reedlings as they are also known, have been a new species for me this season. They've been something that I've been probably wanting for a while to sort of dabble and start off with some soft bills, and it's just been a massive success story in all honesty. After a difficult start with them, which was actually the hen only rearing 2 out of 7 chicks in that first nest, we then lost those young birds. Sadly, we lost one of them that actually drowned in literally 10 millimeters of water, and then the other one, sadly, it just never seemed to reach full strength and could actually fly, and sadly it perished at about 6 weeks old. But now what's happened is they went for a second nest, and in that second nest they reared 3 chicks that are now about 2 months old, and we've actually weaned them, and they're now in a separate bird room. They're in a cage of their own. We had to take them away from the parents because even though they was fully, sort of matured enough to feed themselves and care for themselves, they were still chasing the parents about, asking for food. So it was more than anything, it was wearing the parent birds out. So we took the young birds away, we've popped them in their own cage, and they're now completely independent, and actually the parent birds have once again gone back to nest. So they have just literally had, in the past couple of days, had 4 chicks jump the nest. So that is now a total of 7 bearded Reedlings for this season. The parents are doing a fabulous job, and those young birds are now sort of working themselves out how to use their wings, how to use their feathers, and exploring the aviary. The aviary has been fantastic, absolutely fantastic for breeding the soft bills in. I think having the natural setting with the bamboo in there, the different plants, but also a stream in there and all the wood chip floorings, they've absolutely loved it. It's given them so much enrichment, so many different things to do to keep themselves active, and it's really helped the young birds develop. I've been noticing the young birds have been climbing up the bamboo stalks as they would do in the wild in common reeds and reed beds. Equally, they loved it hopping about the water, and even I've been putting pots of fruit flies scattered about in the aviary, and the young birds have been learning to feed themselves and catch flies for themselves. That said, the flies were flightless flies. They couldn't fly, so they were much easier to catch. But nevertheless, this is skills that the young birds are learning that are going to be fantastic for them as adult birds if they are out in sort of larger planted aviaries foraging for themselves as well. So that has been a massive success, and they've been an absolutely dream to have this season. So there'll definitely be something that we'll be having to look at doing more in the future, and I'm hoping that, all going well, I can get some mates for those young birds and we'll have a couple of pairs for next season, so fingers crossed. A species I'm sure you're all very keen to hear about. How did we get on with the Horfinches? So the Horfinches are here behind me. This is a hen I bred off last year, and it's a different cock bird than was the father to the chicks last year. Now, the pair have done very well. They went to nest in sort of the end of May and actually had 3 eggs. One of them was clear. 2 of them hatched, but there was a 3-day gap between the first egg hatching and the second egg. So we only managed to rear 1 single chick. But this time, fingers crossed, all going well and touch wood, we have done 1 better than we did last year, because 4 weeks ago, I weaned that chick away from the parent birds, and they're doing fantastic. So I put the male bird back in, and the hen has been carrying, but I don't think she will go back to nest now at the beginning of August. I think it's probably too late for her, because by the end of her then going to nest and then rearing that chick to it being fully fledged and hopefully able to feed itself, it'll be mid-September, which is probably a little bit late for them. But here, you can just see him at the back there, is our young Horfinch. So yeah, that cock bird, it's a young male bird. He's probably about 2.5 months old now, something like that. Completely independent, feeding himself, and I have to say, he is fantastic. He's a yellow bird, fantastic colour to him, lovely markings on him as well. Of course, a massive beak, as you'd expect with Horfinches. And yeah, he's just looking excellent. I mean, it's massive. I have to say, he's a proper lump of a Horfinch. I think it's bigger than its dad, and it's 2.5 months old. So, well, we'll see what happens with him, but we'll get him steadied down, and fingers crossed he will be on the show bench for us this autumn and this winter. Now, I did say earlier we'd take a look at what I'm feeding the young birds and to try and encourage them to feed themselves and stay hydrated. So what I've got here, first off, is this is like a pearl moorbide. So what I've done is I've got the moorbide from Pet Source UK, mix that 50-50 with fresh water, and then we're going to add a tub of peas, so that's fresh petit pois, some pinkies, so frozen top insect pinkies, a parsley, so it's a dried parsley from Sam One Bird Products, you can see here. We're then going to mix that all together into what is quite a sort of moist paste, if you like. Mix it all like that, and then we've got the Dry Mix Pro, which is once again from Sam One. Put a little bit of that in there, mix it all together, and it's super easy to make. I make it up fresh every single day. And there we are. That is some lovely egg food that we'll give to all the young birds, the Redpoles, anything that is being fed as well. So tiny little chicks that need feeding by the parents, they'll have that, and equally all the young birds that have molted or are molting and have been weaned will also get that. So yeah, there you are, a quick little tip, and my birds absolutely love it. Now, I'm coming on here as well to show you something. So I'm really quite proud of myself for this, and I really wanted to share it with you guys because hopefully, you know, it gives you an appreciation for just how hard I work, and also where, you know, I get some of the knowledge from, and the knowledge I share with you guys and things I'm going to share with you guys. So recently, I achieved my master's degree from the University of Nottingham in bioveterinary science. So I got it the other day. I've done extremely well. I did my master's research project on twites. So if you know, we're doing a conservation project with twites, which we're doing, you know, the sort of conservation breeding and hopefully a future reintroduction with. Well, they were the study of my master's research, and it was looking at the effect that adult sex ratios, so how many males and how many females in a flock of twite actually has on the behaviour of individual birds. And it was a very interesting study, and that's something that I'm going to share the results with you guys very, very soon, and hopefully publish that paper. So yeah, I just wanted to show that and just say, you know, I'm going to be putting a lot of information now out there that I've learned on my master's course to then sort of help understand bird keeping and really putting it into practice. You know, we're not just learning words and facts, but we're actually putting it into play and making a difference. So yeah, hopefully that's you know, something nice for you all to see. And of course, as you will have seen recently on the channel, we've been doing a lot of like short documentary type things. So we went to Slimbridge and saw all the waterfowl and wetland projects they're doing. We went to ZSL Whipsnade recently and seen some of the amazing bird conservation things that are taking place there. Of course, we went on an international trip and went to see Ivan over in Spain with his world champion Guldians. And of course, actually very soon we are having a video published with a small sort of documentary with the one and only Chester Zoo. So hopefully they are videos that you guys have been enjoying, and please do let me know your thoughts on them. What's been nice is to just show you aviculture doesn't just exist in sort of back garden sheds in people's hobbies that people only just do for that, but actually has a massive and real world impact and can be, you know, vital in conservation. You know, we've seen birds that only exist in captivity in some of these videos that are hopefully going to be reintroduced. And if it wasn't for people in aviculture learning how to care for birds and breed birds successfully and make sure that everything is sort of the absolute best as we can, then we would see these species go extinct. So that's just something that I hope has been nice for you all to see. And if you haven't seen those videos, do go and check them out. They're something that I've worked really hard on. They've took a lot of editing and a lot of organising and a lot of planning to get in. So hopefully you've enjoyed them, and please do let me know your thoughts on them. But That's all from me, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode back here in the bird room for the first time in months. So if you have, make sure to subscribe down below, smash a like on this episode, follow us on other social media, TikTok, Instagram and Facebook for daily updates and behind the scenes footage of all of our birds. So thank you very much for watching once again. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.